I'm curious from a nutritional aspect of WildFit. Are there kind of key tenets that are consistent? And could you walk the viewers through like kind of what the program is? And we're definitely kind of nutrition and human performance dorks here, so I'd be curious to know what are the kind of the key pillars of this.
So obviously we're all at this table going to be familiar with Loren Cordain. And so I had a chat with him a couple of years ago, and I asked him, what gave him the idea. And the reason I asked him that is that I had written an essay back in the early 90s called The Human Diet. And I was a kid. And then all of a sudden the Paleo Diet book came out, and I had two conflicting emotions. The first emotion was vindication, that this theory that I'd stumbled onto had legs, that a doctor had written about it and a book had been published about it. But the other thing is I felt very much like my original idea had been hijacked from me, and I should have, if I'd been older, if I'd known more, I would have done more with it. That's the selfish ego part of anybody, I suppose. And but then I asked Loren, I said, where did you come up with the idea? I wanted to know, I knew my origin. I was curious what his origin was. And the funny thing is, my origin was a combination of my grandfather finding this old sapien skull. He found the oldest Homo sapien skull in history at that point, 259,000 years old. And as a kid, I was transfixed by that idea. So naturally, my mind was already thinking a great deal about early human evolution and what have you. Then I read an article by S. Boyd Eaton that was written in about 1984. And I read it in the early 90s when it made its way onto the internet. I was an early internet person. And I found this article on a bulletin board somewhere. And I asked Loren, where did you get the idea for paleo? And he goes, article by S. Boyd Eaton. So it was the same article. And the article basically suggested something to this effect that, species evolve an evolutionary relationship with their prey. And that evolutionary relationship involves the ability to capture, process, and then utilize that nutrition. And every species has one of these. And the degree to which a species is aligned with its diet is the degree to which it'll be experiencing optimal health. Basic idea. And that humans are also animals, and we're also part of that kingdom. And as a consequence, the same truth applies to us. So where I'm going with this is that some of the principles that we talk about in WildFit are very, very similar to what you would talk about in this sort of origin diet or paleo diet or, that type of thought process. But I would put that there's a fairly significant difference. And that is that the paleo diet focuses largely on what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat, right? You should eat things that come from the Paleolithic, and you should avoid things that come from the Neolithic. And that's sort of the line of the paleo diet. Does that make sense? You guys with me?
Yes. And what is Neolithic again versus the Paleo?
Neolithic is now the new. You can think of it as the new lithic, right? The Neolithic, the new time era. But the Paleolithic being the era that we did most of our evolution in. And so as a consequence, that food is going to make the most sense to us. Now, we have to be careful of paleo for a couple of reasons, is that the minute something starts to work, it becomes branded. And the minute it becomes branded, it tends to become garbage. And that's why you can buy paleo pancakes. I can tell you now, nobody in the Paleolithic was eating pancakes. I saw paleo brownies the other day. I don't understand. And the same thing with keto. Ketosis is a clearly healthy state of being temporarily for the body from time to time. But keto cookies, so we have to be a little bit careful of fads in that way, but there's another thing, and that is that it is virtually impossible at this point to follow the Paleolithic diet because of our genetic modification of food. Now, this is something people sort of tend to know, that GMO is a bad idea, but they don't really understand the spectrum of GMO. So first thing we have to understand is there's a spectrum of GMO, and excuse me if this is just novice to you, but I'm going to assume some people are listening and maybe this is going to be helpful to them. The first thing to understand is literally everything is genetically modified. There is nothing that isn't genetically modified. That's the starting point. So if you are eating a bison, that bison evolved through natural selection over the period of hundreds of thousands of years through the slowest model of genetic modification. Done. Healthy, good. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got what we think of as GMO, a genetically modified organism. And that's where we've gone into a lab and manipulated the genetics. And what we've done is taken a genetic mutation that, first of all, may never have occurred on its own in nature, or if it did, it would have taken millions of years. And we get to make it by 3:00 on Thursday afternoon. And we expect that that's not going to be a problem. And it is. What a lot of people don't realize is there's a middle GMO. And the middle GMO is genetic modification through selective breeding. And that's why, you guys look a lot younger than me, but I'm just going to say this, that when I was a kid, a strawberry was barely the size of my thumb. And now they're the size of an apple. And that's because we like to breed things the way we want them to be, and we have the power to do it. And so to even eat, say, like, here's a good example, beef. There's nothing Paleolithic about beef. Yet I would say that for most people on the paleo diet, beef's a mainstay. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be. What I'm saying is that we need to be a little bit careful about that. And so we bring some understanding of that into our community around how to really measure the depth of or how far something has drifted from the Paleolithic. But there's another key point, and this is the biggest thing of all. And I used to be afraid to talk about it on podcasts because I feared people steal it from us and what have you. Now I was like, now I've been shouting it from the rooftops and nobody's stealing it yet. So I'll just keep going. But here's the biggest thing of all. And I don't know why it isn't everywhere, but just as important as the nutritional aspects of the Paleolithic are the metabolic aspects of the Paleolithic. And what I mean by that is that we evolved energy management systems to survive sub-Saharan Africa. We burn 3 fuel sources, and we burn those 3 fuel sources circumstantially based on the environmental conditions around us. And if we don't burn all 3 of those fuel sources on a regular basis, we will get stuck, and that will cause metabolic problems. And, the most obvious, which being obesity and diabetes, but there are many others as well. And so a very key part of WildFit is teaching people how to create metabolic flexibility and how to run themselves through the evolved metabolic seasons that humans need to have. Understanding that there's a season specifically designed for fat accumulation. There's a season specifically designed for burning off old and excessive and diseased proteins. There's a season specifically designed for cleansing out and building muscle tissue and what have you. When you and a big part of what we do is show people how to do that. And to some degree, that exists in the world right now. When somebody goes on a keto diet, they're effectively triggering a season called spring. I mean, that is, keto is, let me put it another way. During spring, our ancestors went into ketosis because that's the response to spring. Now, what we're showing people is the logic behind that, and then how to run those seasons optimally for whatever their goals are, everything from weight loss to intense endurance sports.
Very cool. Love it. Yeah, I did the paleo back in, I don't know, 2014, and it definitely worked. It wasn't sustainable though, just because like I think I did it for 3 or 4 months, but it was like anytime you got to eat, like it was a pain in the ass, but I was getting the raw milk from the farmer and all this stuff.
Okay, wait. Yeah. Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I'm just gonna be. You guys have both brought up milk now, and I'm gonna show you something about this, and I think it's very funny. I've got lots of friends in the carnivore space. I got lots of friends in the paleo space. I got lots of friends in the keto space, and I'm connected with all those people, and we have all our fun debates on a regular basis. But let's go back to the principle I shared with you. Any food idea or principle that violates what we know about human history and evolutionary biology must be considered suspect. Human beings encountered milk in any kind of concentrated way for the first time about 6,000 years ago, which is 30 seconds, genetically speaking. Humans aren't good at that. And I know that today the whole rage is, yeah, but if you get your raw milk, yeah, look, if you're going to have milk, that would be the milk to have. Or the milk to have would be the milk that came out of a human. Like you understand that one of the constituents of milk is hormones, and the best metaphor for hormones are software. They are lines of code. And so my question is, do you really want lines of instructional code from an animal with 4 stomachs? Do you really want those lines of code? Do you know what they're going to do? So, I'm not, obviously I'm relatively anti-dairy is what I'm trying to say, but what I'm really trying to get at is that's the great idea about having a principle like that, where you can measure those things. That doesn't mean never having those things, but it does mean understanding what might be optimal from a human origins perspective and what might not be. And this might help you with this idea of, whether something's sustainable or not. This is a really important idea. The whole diet industry and the influencer industry is predicated on clickbait, and clickbait is most often driven by fear. And so the best thing to do is to say, avoid these 7 dangerous foods, or tune in for the one food that gets rid of belly fat, or, it's like all this rubbish about and eliminate the white stuff and so on. So much of our focus is on eliminating stuff and being afraid of it. And I can make you afraid of it. I can make you afraid of the water you're drinking. I can make you afraid of the fish you're eating. I can make you afraid of the beef you eat. I can make you afraid of the pasta. I mean, you can be afraid of it all. But what you have to remember is that your health is far more determined by your body getting its physical needs met. If I took a human and put them in a perfect environment, a sealed dome where they had the perfect light, the perfect air, the perfect water, they had the perfect nutrition according to human history, everything was perfect. They never had junk food. They never had additives. They never had glyphosate. It's perfect. They're going to be pretty healthy. But if I use some weird nanobot technology to remove vitamin C from their citrus and liver foods, and that's all I do, they're going to get sick and they're going to die. And they've never had to worry about heavy metals. They've never had to worry about glyphosate. They're still dead. And so when we talk about something not being sustainable, what I would say to you is that if you were to build as a foundation to your relationship with food, this idea, and I'm looking at you, I imagine you mostly do this anyway, or you look healthy. But if you build as a foundation that it's not about not having the fun stuff, it's about first getting everything I need. That's the thing. And then all of a sudden it becomes sustainable. Where it's not sustainable is when it's like guilt or shame because you decided to have an ice cream. Well, if you had a ribeye earlier that day, what the hell? Have your damn ice cream, if you get me.